All right. Without any further ado, I'll welcome everybody to the Youth in Government 2021 Showcase. This is the first year that we've done something like this, so we're really excited that you all are here and that we're getting to try it out with this group. In order to make the showcase round, bills at the conference had to meet certain quality checks, and then each of the bills that you've heard today that you're going to hear today is one of the highest rated bills that was heard at one of our 3 high school youth in government conferences that took place over the last few months. Some of you, your conference just wrapped up a few weeks ago. Some of you, it has been a few months. So hopefully you can pick right back up and jump right back into Parley Pro. Without any further ado, I'll turn it over to our 3 chairs this evening who have graciously made time to come back and chair a couple more rounds of debate for us. So thank you guys for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm Paige Ryan. I'm a senior. I'm from Chattanooga. This is like my 15th or something YIG conference, and I'm really excited to be cheering for you guys.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm from Memphis. I'm a junior at MUS, and yeah, really excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Hadia. I am a senior at Brentwood Academy. I don't even remember how many YIG conferences I've been to at this point, but I'm excited to chair yet again.
Awesome. A couple more announcements before we get started. Quick reminder, just like at our conferences, you're going to raise your hand via Zoom if you want to be recognized. Zoom has rolled out updates since our first conference. So for some of you, the raise hand button is going to be at the bottom of your participants sidebar if you hit your participants button. For some of you, it's going to be an option when you hit your reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. So it may have changed. We will not be entertaining amendments on the following bills, as there is no other chamber to approve the amendments. But we will entertain motions to extend Compro Debate. We can extend Compro Debate by 1 round for each bill. So that motion will be in order if it gets made during legislation. All right, turn it back over to our first chair. Have a wonderful round of debate.
Alrighty, I will be your first chair this afternoon. And so we'll go ahead and get started. Would the patrons of Red House Bill 21-2-6, Enderley and Bullock Papa, please unmute yourselves? You may begin your introduction whenever you're ready.
As you've probably all heard, Tennessee needs to address its carbon emissions. In 2017, Tennessee produced 98 million tons of CO2. A whopping 57% of those emissions came from electricity production. Our bill implements a cap and trade program. This will gradually lower Tennessee's carbon emissions from electricity production to 0 by 2050. An easy way to understand this bill is to look at things from the perspective of an electricity producer.
Bob operates a natural gas electricity generator. He sells this electricity to the state. This year, however, he needs to purchase a carbon credit for every ton of CO2 emissions his plant will produce.
This year, the state is auctioning off 50 million credits. At the start of the auction, the price per credit is $24. But as the auction goes on, the price will drop by 1 cent every 2 minutes, but stops decreasing at the reserve price of $2. The auction ends when all credits have been sold. The money from the auction covers program costs and is then distributed to Tennesseans.
As a plant operator, Bob predicted that he would need 1 million credits. He also knows that he can only afford to pay $15 for each credit. By the time the price reaches this point, credits are selling very quickly. This makes him nervous that credits are about to sell out, so he purchases his for $14 each. The credits then fully run out at $13.
Bob's friend Sally runs a coal power plant that produces much more CO2. Because she needed so many credits, she wasn't able to purchase all of the credits she needed. She scales back on her production, but still needs a few more.
As the year goes on, Bob realizes he has extra credits, so he sells some of his to Sally. With this extra cash, he upgrades his facility to reduce his plant's CO2 emissions and to lower the amount of credits he will need to purchase for the next year.
And it's a good thing that he did because the number of credits sold goes down each year.
At the end of the year, Bob will bring proof of his credits to the state. The state makes sure that his credits cover the emissions for the electricity he was paid for. If he doesn't have enough, he must purchase credits to cover the discrepancy. This bill encourages the free market to find the most efficient ways of reducing emissions. And by supporting this bill, we're supporting a cleaner,
Sorry,
safer
delegates,
energy for
but
future
time for your introduction has elapsed. We will now move into 2 minutes. Oh, I'm so sorry. We'll now move into intent speeches. Is that correct, or is it the other way around? No, that's correct. Okay, now move into intent speeches. Is there a con intent speaker on the floor? Seeing none, is there a pro intent speaker on the floor? Again, seeing none, we will move directly into 2 minutes of, okay, it's technical questions first. So we got it. Okay, technical questions. Please unmute and ask your question in the order in which I call you, and I will call more if time allows. Nashi, McDaniel, Dungan, Ginther, Sam, McNulty, Arnold, and I'll call more if time allows.
Nashi Signal Mountain, how much waste is produced by electricity production?
That isn't what our bill is addressing. Sorry.
McDaniel Baylor. Do you have an estimate for how much MTCO2e emissions will occur in 2021?
We have an estimate of around 51 million metric tons from past years.
Dungan, Signal Mountain. Do any states have programs similar to this?
Yes, many states have programs similar to this. There's a Northeast cap and trade program in Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And there's also one in California.
Ginther, Signal Mountain. How many power plants are currently located in Tennessee?
It depends on what size of power plants you're looking at. For the very large power plants above 50 megawatts, it's around 100.
Sam, Carville High School. Around how much emissions do each plant produce?
That's wildly dependent on the form of electricity production. So for coal, it's about 0.75 kilograms per megawatt hour. And then for solar, for comparison, it's 0.05 kilograms per megawatt hour.
McNulty West, about how much does global warming cost globally per year?
We do not have that data at this time.
Arnold Summit, this only affects power plants that sorry, never mind.
Seeing as we have 15 seconds, I can take one more speaker.
Luke Waits of Pope John Paul II High School. What will happen to the industries that rely on this coal and electricity production, or the families that need for heating?
Patron Debate.
Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Seeing as we have 5 seconds remaining, the chair will absorb the remainder of your time, and we will now move into Compro Debate. Do I see a con speaker on the floor? Oh gosh, Hayes.
Cameron Hayes, McCollege School. Do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Delegate McDaniel, I yield my time to him. I wonder, just really briefly, do you all see this bill affecting people who work in these industries, the employees of these big companies? How does it affect them?
So the number of employees in renewable energy is actually significantly higher than those already working in like the coal and natural gas industries. So there's more employment opportunities in clean energy.
And the old forms of energy are already being phased out. This is just speeding up the process a little.
Yes, but my question is, are these companies in Tennessee, are they growing rapidly? Because if these people get out of jobs, then that's people losing money to their households. So are these, go ahead.
I'm sorry, delegates, but time for this con round has elapsed. We'll now move into our first pro round. Do I see a pro speaker on the floor? Dungan?
Dungan, Signal Mountain. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Wolf.
So I believe in line 35, you say that they will participate in an online Dutch auction. I was just curious as to where the Dutch part comes from.
So that comes from starting at a higher price and then decreasing as time goes on instead of slowly increasing. And this encourages companies that have to buy a lot of credits to buy them earlier when they're more expensive, just because they can't wait when there might not be as many credits left. So this
Okay,
benefits
thank
small
you.
businesses.
And I believe in your introduction, you stated that the money will be distributed to Tennesseans. Who will be getting that money?
Yeah, it's all Tennesseans over the age of 18 with legal residence.
Okay, I yield my time.
May I address the floor?
I'm sorry, but seeing as you have 1 second, I will absorb the remainder of your time. We'll now move into our second con round. Do I see a con speaker on the floor? Waits.
Luke Waits of Pope John Paul II High School. May I ask the patrons a possible series of questions?
They do.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Vincent Giovanelli. So you say that the renewable energy companies have a lot of people in them, but wouldn't that make it harder for families that are laid off to find a job if there's so many people already in the industry?
We were talking about how there's a lot of employment already in the clean energy sector, like because the cost of producing solar energy and wind energy has decreased drastically in the last few years. We're already shifting away from fossil fuels, and we're just accelerating this process to avoid the negative consequences of runaway global warming.
And
do you not believe that accelerating this could cause a bad thing for low-income families? Because most low-income families that are working this are blue-collar workers. So you're not only taking away large coal or electricity that they could be using to keep their house hotter, because if they don't have more credits, they're going to up the prices of the electricity, so they can't keep their house warm, but you're also getting them laid off of their jobs, so they can't even afford what electricity they could get.
Actually, our bill could possibly help these families because it doesn't affect
Sorry,
electricity
patrons,
prices.
the time for this round has elapsed. We'll now enter. I see 2 motions on the floor. Brown.
Brown, Hendersonville, motion to extend pro-con debate by 1 round.
That motion is in order, delegate. The motion is to extend pro-con debate by 1 round each, so adding 1 additional pro and 1 additional con round. We will attempt to pass this by virtual acclamation. So all those in favor, please use the yes button, and all those opposed, please use the no button. Seeing an overwhelming majority, this motion does pass, and Compro debate will be extended by 2 rounds. Seeing no further motions, I will now enter our second pro round. Do I see a pro speaker on the floor? Tally.
Ellie Hillwood High School. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
May I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Daniel. Okay, will a new committee be formed by the state to auction off these permits? And if so, under what jurisdiction will they be?
So this is going to be under the state EPA, and this is going to be paid for by some of the funds raised by the auction.
It pays for itself.
Okay, and do permits have a time frame? And if so, for how long do those last?
Yes, permits expire at the beginning of the next auction.
But if there's a mix up and maybe you need a few more, there is a grace period. So we don't immediately crack down on that. They are given
3 months.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I yield my time.
Thea Soriana, Springfield. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
Seeing as you have 4 seconds, I will rule that they do not. I'm sorry, delegate. With that, we will move into our third con round. Is there a con speaker on the floor? Carpenter?
Carpenter Beach, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Holderby,
Gallatin, I think. I'm not sure. It's Hannah. Okay. So I'm pretty neutral in this. I'm just curious if you could explain the grid, like the power, how it's going to be distributed if the companies are not allowed to because they cannot pay for the fines, like how that's going to work a little more.
So the grid is very flexible, and like Tennessee's electrical grid has like many operators, and they respond to electricity demands, and that this means that if one plant reduces or stops their output in response to our bill, other plants will fill in the gap. And because Tennessee has one of the best environments for low CO2 electricity generation, because we have lots of rivers for hydroelectric production, we're relatively sunny, and we have high levels of wind in many parts of the state. Renewable energy is cheaper than in many other areas of the country.
And if something were to happen, we are connected.
Delegates, but time for this round has elapsed. We'll now move into our third and final pro round. Is there a pro speaker on the floor? Thais Ariana.
Hey, Soriana Springfield, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Wolf Dubin. So in section 7, you mentioned that companies will be required to have third-party documentation. Who exactly would these third parties be, and what kind of documentation will they need to submit?
This is referring to the the potential for carbon negative electricity generation. And the issue is with carbon negative electricity generation, currently there's extremely few power plants that even operate in this scenario. And with other forms of electricity generation, the state already, there's already like very tested methods of automatically like enforcing them and seeing how much CO2 is emitted, because the state already tracks how much electricity they add to the grid. The carbon negative ones need third-party documentation.
Oh, and for selling on the private market, it's just like a contract. There are already systems.
I apologize, delegates, but time for our third and final pro round has elapsed. We will now move into our fourth and final con round. Is there a con speaker on the floor? McDaniel.
McDaniel Baylor, to the patrons yield to a possible series of questions.
They do so yield.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Bati. So in section, oh my gosh. Whatever. You said the money is going to be given to the residents of Tennessee. Why should they be, why are you giving them to the people of Tennessee? Do you think that they should maybe be diverted into another government program?
Well, this covers any if electricity prices are affected in any way, this covers the prices for that, so that low-income families could actually gain money from our bill instead of losing it.
And this was also a political decision to earn the public support over the long time frame needed for this bill to make a meaningful impact. Without the credit, Tennesseans would likely end up resenting the bill for possibly causing higher electricity prices without compensating them.
I yield the remainder of my time.
I'm sorry, delegate, but time for this round has elapsed. And we will now move into 1 minute of the patron summation. Patrons, you may begin whenever you're ready.
It is important for Tennesseans to take action to improve the environment. And it's also important how we get there. Our bill does this with no effect on the Tennessee budget while putting money into the hands of Tennesseans and helping the state take charge in the fight against climate change. By passing our bill, you're putting Tennessee on a positive, renewable path. Thank you. We yield the remainder of our time to the chair.
Thank you, delegates. With that, the chair absorbs the remainder of your time, and we will now enter voting procedure. For just to get things cleared up, to vote yes, you will use the yes button. To vote against, you will use the no button, and to abstain, you will use the go slower button. If you should only be abstaining if you were not present for the substance of the bill, and therefore cannot form an opinion. And because some of your yes and no buttons will go away, I will ask you all to vote at the same time. So I'll count off, and on 3, I will ask you all to vote. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, with a final vote of 40-7-1, this bill does pass. Congratulations, sponsors.
Congratulations, delegates. And with that, we will now move down the docket to Blue Senate Bill 21-3-2. If the sponsors of that bill would like to unmute themselves and begin their introduction whenever they're ready.
Imagine getting to experience the joy of having a baby, but then having to go back to work after just 4 weeks of leave, 2 of which were unpaid. This was the case for Emily, who recently had a baby boy. On her first day back at work, after only 4 weeks of leave, Emily spent the day crying out of guilt for leaving her son and yearning to be with him. In 2017, the government found that only 14% of US civilian workers were granted paid parental leave. Currently, Tennessee allows workers to take up to 16 weeks of parental leave. However, it is up to the employer's discretion if any of this time is paid. We would like to change this to require that at least the first 8 weeks of leave be paid through a raise of the unemployment insurance tax. All of us have parents, and many of us will become parents in the future. There is no one who will not be positively affected by the passage of this bill.
As previously stated, we think this bill would be extremely beneficial to both parents and children for multiple reasons. For example, research has shown that parental involvement during this period of time increases the mental and physical health of both parties. On a more economical note, children are expensive, and most households simply can't afford to have a child if their pay is suspended. Additionally, social class inequalities are more common when parental leave is not required to be paid. Because lower class workers are less likely to be granted paid parental leave than those in higher socioeconomic positions. As you can see, this is not only a social issue, but a health and economical issue. We yield the remainder of our time for our summation.
Thank you. With that, the delegates have yielded 32 seconds to their summation, and we will now move into 2 minutes of technical questions. Please unmute and speak in the order in which I call you. I'm going to butcher this. Himatsingani, Nashi, Clyde, McDaniel, Giovanelli, Ginther, Barton, and I'll call more if time allows.
Himatsingani, Raven High School. So in section 7 of your bill, you said you want to raise the tax by 4.2 to 4.6%. What are you hoping from doing this for, like, money-wise? Like, how much money are you hoping to get from that?
So we're actually not raising it by 4.2 to 4.6%. We're raising it to that amount. So it's already at 2.7%. So the actual raise is less than 2%. But we're hoping to obtain the required funds that will be needed to cover employees throughout the state, their income for 8 weeks.
Nashi Signal Mountain, has this been implemented anywhere else?
Yes, so the United States is the only industrialized country that does not require it, but within the United States, there are 8 states as well as DC, Washington, DC, that require it.
Thank you.
Clyde Clarksville Academy, do the parental leave laws that are currently in place extend to adoption or just childbirth?
Yes, they do. The one and foster care as well, yes. And the one in Tennessee also includes that currently, so that part won't be changing.
Thank you.
McDaniel Baylor, exactly how long is a period of parental leave? Just to clarify.
8 weeks under our law.
Giovanelli Beach. So is this going to be paid by the government or the companies?
So it's actually a raise of the unemployment insurance tax, which is already in place for most businesses. So it will be a tax which will offset any state payments that would come up. So it's funded through the state, but the funds are originally coming from the employer.
Ginther, Signal Mountain. So after the first 8 weeks, the employer, can they choose to give the
I
parental leave?
apologize, delegates, but time for technical questions has elapsed. We will now move into our con and pro intent speeches. Is there a con intent speaker on the floor? One more time, is there a con intent speaker on the floor? Waits, are you wishing to speak con?
Yes, ma'am.
Briefly, I will entertain this motion and then I will recognize your intent speech. Carpenter, please rise and state your motion.
Carpenter Beach, point of information. If we don't have a intent speech already prepared and on the docket, we're not allowed to give one, correct?
That is not correct. So
Oh, okay.
There are 4 intent speeches currently prepared on the docket. So
Mhm.
those people will be automatically recognized for their intent speech. For any other intent speeches that do not already have a, pre-prepared speech, anyone from the floor may give a speech.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, Waits, you are now recognized for your intent speech. You're on mute.
Luke Waits at Pope John Paul II High School. I believe that this could harm businesses due to people taking off parental leave, and when adopting, like if someone adopts like a 15-year-old or something, you do not need 8 weeks of paid maternal leave for that. And also, I believe if a family believes themselves financially stable enough to care for a child for the rest of their 18 years, they should be able to financially care for them for 8 weeks at the start. That is all, ma'am. I yield the remainder of my time to the floor.
Thank you, Delegate. With that, the chair absorbs the remainder of your time. We do have a pro-intent speech. So, Vora, you are now recognized for your pro-intent speech, if they're here. Okay, seeing as they do not appear to be present, we will move on to Compro Debate. Is there a con speaker on the floor? I see a motion on the floor. McNulty, please rise and state your motion.
Motion, point of order. If the intent speaker prepared on the docket is not present, will this speech be up for grabs?
Tyler, what do we do about that?
Yes, if we have someone who would like to give that pro-intent speech, we can recognize that.
I apologize. Then we will recognize the pro-intent speech. Is there another pro-intent speaker on the floor? McNulty.
McNulty West, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
So parental leave is very important because it allows parents to prepare their homes and bond with their children as soon as they're born. Not only may there be health implications, but a lot of the times, even in the cases of adoption, you need time to bond with the child and to create a safe space for them. This is also true for newborns. Additionally, this will help communities that have lower income because it will allow them to take jobs and continue education and things like that when they are pregnant and not be scared, because some people may turn down a job if they know they may be having a child because they're scared that they cannot take leave. They may also choose not to have a child, and then because they cannot afford to have one. Also, then if they can continue to have their job, they can continue to seek out housing potentially. Owning property is one of the best ways to build generational wealth and break the cycle of poverty. It is also true that development is impacted for small children by their parents being there for them. Whether it's the mom or the dad, it's important to have someone with the child. That way they can begin to bond with them and hit their milestones. It's also true that since this is parental leave and not just maternal leave, it does not discourage the hiring of women. If this bill just said that women get maternal leave, then it would mean, oh, let's just hire a man so we don't have to pay for his unemployment. But it includes both, which both parents do deserve this leave, and it also therefore does not incentivize sexist hiring practices. It is also true that in terms of foster care, many children have been moved around a lot and need time to settle. So it's even more important in that instance than in other adoptions. Mothers, fathers, and other parents need time to bond with their children, and their children need time to settle in and to become mature enough to live potentially in daycare or with another guardian to look after them. This also allows parents to prepare their homes for when they do return to work so that they are less distracted and needing to leave less in order to care for the children. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
Thank you, Delegate. With that, the chair absorbs the remainder of your time, and we will now move into Compro Debate. Is there a con speaker on the floor? Angelova.
Angelova, Beach High School. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Body McCallie. So how will this affect small businesses that cannot afford to pay paternal leave for all parents or for all their employees?
So our bill actually does not include small businesses, so we don't foresee that being a problem.
Thank you. But also, do you not believe that this might possibly lead to discrimination of women in hiring? Because most people who are in positions of hiring others will not want to hire them anymore, knowing that they will be forced to give these women paid maternity leave.
I believe McNulty addressed this in her pro-intent speech. We don't believe that will happen since this is requiring it for both men and women. And just because it's required doesn't mean the men or women will take it. So we don't necessarily foresee that being a problem.
Thank you. And also, could you please elaborate on the tax you mentioned in your bill? How will that be a state tax for all, or that will only be for employees who are a part of the company?
So it's paid by the employers.
Apologize, delegates, but time for this con round has elapsed. We will now move into our first pro round. Is there a pro speaker on the floor? I'm going to butcher this as well. Shintala Pudi.
Chindalapudi, Webb, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do. So yield. I'm sorry.
So could you elaborate on the possible health benefits that your bill will bring?
Physically, for the children, if the parents take parental leave, they'll have more time to take their child to doctor's appointments, get their vaccines, and just like checkup appointments.
And also for the mental health of the parent, we think this is really important because research has shown that having this available to parents decreases postpartum depression. And also they just won't have the worry in the back of their mind, like, do I have enough money to provide for my newborn? So we think it's really important.
And can you also elaborate on how this won't impact small businesses? Because I think that a counter argument has been that this will impact low income businesses, but you said that doesn't include small businesses in your bill.
Right, so our current bill does not apply to small businesses. They won't be experiencing a tax raise. We hope that maybe one day our bill will enlarge.
I apologize, delegates, but time for this pro round has elapsed. We'll now move into our second con round. Is there a con speaker on the floor? Gilmer.
Gilmer, Hume, Fogg, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Ginther. So I just wanted you to elaborate on if you have a specific estimate for the amount of money that the government will need to pay for this extra parental leave, as well as the revenue you expect to generate from raising this tax by 2-ish%.
So we don't expect there to be any revenue. We think it'll pretty much exactly offset the amount that is needed. And we found the money, I think that's what you're asking. We found the money by taking the amount of people we expect to take parental leave each year, multiplying that by the median Tennessee income for 8 weeks, then dividing that by the number of employees in Tennessee. And then we use that number to find the percentage of the taxable wage base that needs to go towards parental leave. And we added that to 2.7, which is the current amount. And we believe that it'll be right about however much.
Delegates, but time for this con run has elapsed. We will now enter our second and final pro round. Is there a pro speaker on the floor? Smith, please rise and state your motion.
Corbin Smith, East Ridge High School. Motion to extend pro-con debate by 1 round.
That motion is in order, delegate. Is there a second to extending pro-con debate?
I second.
Second.
Seeing seconds, we will now attempt to pass this motion. Again, you may not abstain. All those in favor vote with the yes button. All those opposed, the no button. Seeing a clear majority, this motion does pass, and pro-con debate will be extended by 1 round each. We will now resume our second pro round. All those wishing to speak pro, please raise your hands at this time. You're not recognized.
You, Collierville, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Barton. Sorry. Okay. Is it true that paid parental leave allows for the betterment of the child and parent relationship, which then allows for a long-term reduction in inequality and economic growth through these measures?
Yes, that's true.
And is it also true that this issue of unpaid parental leaves and unemployment disproportionately affects people of color primarily?
Yes.
I yield my time. Thank you.
Barton, Webb to the patrons yield to a possible series of questions.
They do so yield.
Approximately in the state of Tennessee, how many businesses employ 500 people or more?
We don't have that number at this time, but it's a good amount. So the money will be divided up between a lot of businesses.
I yield my time to the chair.
Thank you, delegate. With that, the chair absorbs the remainder of your time, and we will now move into our third con round. Is there a con speaker on the floor? Wiggs?
WIG's favorite high school. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Gardner. So in raising the amount of money that these parents would get, how would you ensure that companies, especially large corporations that are not based in Tennessee, would pay this?
So it's for Tennessee companies. So if it's a larger company that employs people in Tennessee, there's typically like a subset of the company that would work in Tennessee. And so they'll still be paying that unemployment tax. And so it comes like while the employers are paying the tax, it's the state that's giving the funds directly to the employee. So we don't think that will really be a problem.
Okay, so like say like Walmart or something, their employees would still get the benefits from this?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time.
Gardner, Central Magnet. The patrons yield to a possible series of questions.
I'm sorry, delegate, but as you have 1 second, the chair will absorb the remainder of your time, and we will now move into our third and final pro round. Is there a pro speaker on the floor? Hi.
Hi, Nolensville, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Clyde. As previously mentioned, the paid parental leave is considered a right in every other developed nation in the world. And it is absolutely crucial that the United States adopt this. But if the federal government refuses to take care of its citizens, the states must step in to solve this problem. This bill is pro-family and it is budget neutral as it pays for itself. And in response to a previous delegate who mentioned that mothers should already be financially able to care for their children when they have them, this bill, it's not just that parents should be able to financially care for their children, it's that after the birth of the child, they need to spend time with them in order to foster a bond between them and take time off of work to care for them. I yield the remainder of my time.
Clyde, Clarksville Academy. Did the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield. You have 5 seconds.
Okay, do you think this bill could possibly increase productivity because perhaps the parent will feel less guilty about leaving their child at home?
Yes, we definitely do.
I'm sorry, delegate, but time for this round has elapsed. We will now move in. Yes, we will now move into our fourth and final con round. Is there a con speaker on the floor? Rogers.
Rogers and Comfort, Signal Mountain. Will the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Ginther. In section 3, you say that you'll add a section to the website of the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development. Could you expand on what the application process will look like, or if there will need to be an employee at the Bureau to go through that application? You also mentioned that it goes straight to the employer. So can you just elaborate on that process, please?
So there is actually already an application process to file for unemployment. So it'll just be like a second button for that where the application goes straight to the employer.
Perfect. So it'll go to those same employees that receive the unemployment applications, or will you need to hire new people for that?
Well, when you're looking for your unemployment application, it's in the same spot. So everyone who applies for unemployment won't apply for this because they're two separate things, but that's where you would find it.
Okay, I yield the remainder of my time.
If there may address the floor.
I'm sorry, delegates, but time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into 1 minute and 32 seconds of the patron summation. Patrons, you may unmute and begin whenever you're ready.
Children are expensive, and the harsh reality is that most Tennessee households simply can't afford to have a child if their pay is being suspended for a period of time afterwards. Think about this statistic. The United States is the only industrialized country in the world that does not require paid parental leave. This poses the question, why? Why can't we marginally raise taxes when it will lead to an astronomical health benefits, both mentally and physically, for parents and children alike? Additionally, this bill will help the economy because parents will be receiving a steady income they can put back into the Tennessee economy. This will also lead to lower unemployment rates, which are already high due to the pandemic, since many parents, especially women, are forced to leave the workforce if they aren't offered paid parental leave. 25% of women return to work only 2 weeks after a birth or adoption, and 76% of fathers return after just one. We believe that our bill will drastically lower these statistics. After a similar bill was passed in California, the amount of women who took paid parental leave doubled. Overall, this bill will raise the standard of living in Tennessee. Ultimately, there is no one who isn't positively affected by this bill. And quickly, I do want to touch on something mentioned in the con intent speech. If someone is adopting a 15-year-old, we still think it's important that they have a chance to bond with their new child, especially without having to worry about work stuff. And also, just because it's offered doesn't mean people will automatically take it. So we think that's important to consider as well. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
Thank you, delegates. With that, the chair absorbs the remainder of your time, and we will vote in the same way that I outlined previously. So in favor is the yes button, opposed is the no button, and abstentions will be the go slower button. And again, I will count off so that we can all vote at once on a count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, with a final vote of 42 to 5, this bill does pass. Congratulations, sponsors. Also, before we transition to a new chair, Paige, I know you can't stay on until the end, so I just want to offer a quick word of thanks to our chair for hopping on, making the time today, and doing just a wonderful job. So thank you.
Yep, I will be hopping off, so thank you guys.
Good. Thanks, Paige.
Okay, we are going to move on to Blue Senate Bill 21-1-4. So patrons of Blue Senate Bill 21-1-4, an act to regulate animal shelters and establish requirements for the adoption of animals. Please prepare to present. Patrons, you have 2 minutes for your introduction. Please begin when ready.
On the night of March 12th, 2012, a Siberian Husky named Logan was sleeping peacefully in his backyard when someone broke in and poured acid on his face. The acid's effects spread quickly and eventually led to his slow and painful death that summer. Logan's owner prompted people to think about this traumatic event and felt the need to do something about it in order to prevent animal abuse in the future. He went on to develop Logan's Law in Michigan in an effort to protect their animals, and we can easily bring the effort to Tennessee. The goal of Logan's Law is to protect other animals from people like the man that killed Logan from going to a shelter and adopting. The process required in Michigan is that when an animal abuse is reported, the Michigan State Police must enter it into their ICHAT, Internet Criminal History Access Tool system, to be reviewed when someone applies to adopt. In Tennessee, this system is called TBI, or the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and our goal is to require abusers to be entered into the registry. When accessed by the shelter, if the registry shows an offense for animal abuse in the last 5 years, they have the permission to deny adoption to the applicant.
This bill can only have a positive impact on the issue of animal abuse, though it may be argued that a decrease in adoptions can lead to an increase in euthanization in the shelters. That is unlikely. Many animals adopted by abusers are returned to the shelter if they're lucky, so the number in shelters won't change drastically. Not to mention only 1.5 million animals are euthanized in the shelters per year in the U.S., which is nothing compared to the 10 million that suffer slow, painful deaths at the hands of an animal abuser. We yield our time to our remainder of our summation.
And with that, the patrons have yielded 42 seconds to their summation. We will now move into technical questions. Are there any technical questions on the floor? We will go in this order, and if time allows, we will add more. So Richards, Himatsangani, McDaniel, Nashi, Lowe.
Richard, Springfield High School. How many cases of animal abuse were reported in Tennessee in the last year?
In the last year, we don't have that information, but I think in 2018, it was 10 million. Or 10 million in the US, I'm sorry, excuse me.
I'm at Singani Greenwood High School. So discussing again, like the impact of this bill, how like would just like only looking how like like we're only looking at if they're animal abusers or not, do you think that animal abuse would decrease?
I think this would be more fitting for a question in pro-con debate.
McDaniel, Baylor, how much would these background checks cost?
It wouldn't cost anything as the system is already in place, and it would be an optional addition to the application process.
Nash Signal Mountain. So is this bill expanding on background checks or just adding the abusers to the system?
It's expanding on the background check to add a section that will talk about abuse. As of right now, all you need is ID.
Okay, thank you.
Wait for Pope John Paul II High School. In your example, someone broke in and poured acid on a dog. How will preventing users from adopting prevent incidents like that?
That will just prevent people. Well, I feel like this is better fit for pro-con debate. I'm sorry.
Thank you, ma'am.
Low red ink. How many states besides Michigan have implemented similar laws?
Michigan is the only one that we're aware of.
And we have time for two more. So Funk and then Holderby.
Font to do Christian Academy. What is the percent of applicants who are currently denied?
We do not have that statistic.
Holderby, Green Hill. So does this bill use the current TBI Animal Abuse Registry to get its info on animal abusers?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, time for technical questions has elapsed. So we'll now move into intent speeches. Do I have a con intent speaker on the floor? Wait.
Luke Waits of Pope John Paul II High School. I believe that this bill is this bill has some flaws to it and its ideas. It could, if someone like as a child or something did something to hurt an animal, 5 years later that could come back and bite them, or even if it was only like 10 or 15 years, they're still going to be on that registry at that point. So people could still see that and harbor opinions of them, etc., for one mistake they made many years down the line. And it also could lead to false accusations, preventing people from getting adopted. Like, oh, he left his dog outside without water or something. And without proof, this would lead to a bunch of witch trial-esque accusations. I yield the remainder of my time to the floor.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of their time to the chair. Before I move on to a pro intent speech, I saw two motions. Are those motions? I saw McNulty first. McNulty, do you still have a motion?
Motion for a point of order.
Please rise and state your point.
Is it true that in one session or one day you can only give one intent speech?
Today's a little bit different than normal.
Okay.
I think you can give more than one. That's what I was told. I believe I'm correct in saying that.
Yes, we're going to do our best to spread them around, but the priority is filling intent speech slots.
Yes. Seeing no further motions, I'll now move into a pro intent speech. Do I have a pro intent speaker on the floor? Adarsh, Ravenwood.
Adarsh, Ravenwood, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
Delegates, I'm sure we all have an animal in our lives that we care a lot for, whether it be your dog, cat, hamster, fish. Many of us here know how special the creatures around us are. Therefore, we should try to make sure that the law works towards protecting those animals when they are put in situations that are potentially harmful. 71% of domestic violence victims reported that their abuser also targeted pets, and researchers found that pet abuse had occurred in 88% of the families under supervision for physical abuse of their children. Along with this, almost 250,000 animals fall victim to animal hoarding cases per year. These numbers show that this is much more serious than an isolated event. These delegates are not asking for funds. They're simply trying to pass a law to help these creatures be safer in their own homes. And therefore, I completely urge passage of this bill and yield the remainder of my time.
And with that, the patron is the remainder of their time to the chair and urged passage. We'll now move into Compro Debate. Do I have my first con speaker? I apologize if I butcher this. Ikeda.
Ikeda Sanchez Summit. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Dungan. Patrons, while I agree with the basic idea of this law, there is a few minor flaws that I would like clarification on. For example, service animals. Say that there is someone with paranoid schizophrenia and they once beat a dog. However, if they're required to get a service animal and are blocked from doing so because of that one incident, are there any exceptions to this? Or is there a way for them to apply for an exception?
That'll be up to the local police who put that on the registry, as we have no control over who ends up on the registry. So that'll be up to their conviction, and it is completely optional for the shelters to add this to their application. This is just giving them the option to add this in order to animals that they're adopting out.
Thank you. I yield the remainder of time.
Dungan, Signal Mountain, do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield. You have 10 seconds.
Are you at all concerned that the use of the TBI would tie up valuable resources that could be allocated elsewhere?
I'm not, as it'll be a fairly small addition to the registry.
I'm so sorry, delegates, but time for this con round has elapsed. Please rise and state your motion.
Motion for point of information.
Please rise and state your point.
Is it true that in section 3 of the bill, it says that offenses that occurred more than 5 years prior to the application would not be considered?
Yes.
I deferred to the patrons and they answered. So, yes, we will now move into our first pro round. I'm my first pro speaker. Low.
Low, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
May I yield my time to the fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Bati. I believe, like, as a delegate brought up during his con speech, I do not believe that this is something that could be a mistake, like he said, because you don't really, like, accidentally abuse an animal like that. And I don't believe that, like, for example, what he said, like putting, like, just leaving them outside with water, that would very likely not end in police conviction. Most police convictions of animal abuse are very extreme cases that get brought to the law, and they are brought to law for a reason, because they are there. I do not believe that animal abuse can be a mistake, and I do not believe that those people should be allowed to have animals like that and continue this cycle, because even in my own state, like in my own like area, I've seen instances of, like a few months ago, there was people going around like adopting a bunch of pit bulls just so they could go and abuse them and hurt them. And I do not believe those that have animal abuse charges should be allowed to do that. I yield my time.
Oli Bati, Macaulay School. May I address the floor?
That is your right. You have 7 seconds.
I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of their time to the chair. We will now move into our second con round. Do I have my second con speaker? Before I select one, please rise and state your motion.
Wigs Fairview, motion to add an additional round to pro-con debate.
That motion is in order. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seeing a second, we'll now attempt to pass this virtually by clicking yes or no. All in favor, click yes. All opposed, click no. Seeing an overwhelming majority of yes, that motion is in order. We will add an additional con and pro round to debate. So, I believe I was on con. Do I have my next con speaker? Tuliatis from St. Mary's.
Tuliatis, St. Mary's, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do, so yield.
And may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Smith. So to clarify, does Tennessee currently have like any review system on people looking to adopt animals?
No, as of right now, all you need to adopt an animal is your ID saying that you're over 18 and an address to your house.
Okay. And then are there like, again, currently, are there any limits on how many animals that you can adopt at one time?
Not to our knowledge.
Okay. And then if the person looking to adopt has a criminal record, does it only matter if they like abused an animal?
That's all that this bill is suggesting, is that is in addition to this application process. And then it's only within the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you. I yield my time.
Corbin Smith, Eastridge High School, do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
They do, so yield, you have 13 seconds.
So in your bill, is it saying that implementing these tier applications is optional?
Yes.
So what's preventing an animal abuser just going to a different shelter if it's optional?
That is a great question. Sorry, there's a.
So sorry, delegates, but time for this round of con debate has elapsed. We'll now move into our next pro round. Do I have my next pro speaker? Clyde.
Clyde, Clarksville Academy. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do, so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Nashi. Okay, so are you aware that approximately 1 million animals are abused every single year?
Yes.
And do you think that your bill will significantly decrease that number?
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Nashi, Signal Mountain, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do, so yield, you have 40 seconds.
All right. Are you aware that abuse is regularly or repeatedly abusing an animal?
Yes.
And are you aware that just a one-time mistake is not abuse?
Yes.
So therefore, just a one-time mistake, or like leaving your dog, forgetting to feed your dog, wouldn't count as abuse and wouldn't go on the record.
Exactly.
Okay, and this will reduce abusers from adopting.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of their time to the chair. We'll now move into our next con round. Do I have my next con speaker? Tali from Hillwood.
Tally, Hillwood High School. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do, so yield.
May I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Bhatti. Okay, so in section 1 of this bill, background checks are defined as including education, employment history, as well as other factors. Will that definition wholly apply to adoption agencies' background checks, or will only certain aspects apply, such as using criminal history specifically?
Only certain aspects. In TBI, there are different sections of the background check, so we would only allow them to access to the animal abuse.
Okay, thank you. I yield my time.
Ali Bhatti, Macaulay School, the patrons yield to a possible series of questions.
They do, so yield, you have 27 seconds.
So are you aware that many people with criminal backgrounds and that are in jail, were in jail, for those type of people, pets are tools of rehabilitation for many of them. So would this not prevent and prohibit some ex-convicts from rehabilitating themselves?
It will not, as this isn't a full criminal history. It is solely animal abuse.
And it's only in the past 5 years.
Okay. And so if a dog is going to be euthanized and someone fails a background check, would the shelter euthanize a dog instead of giving them to the...
I'm so sorry, delegates, but time for this con round has elapsed. We'll now move into our final pro round. Do I have a final pro speaker? Brown.
Brown, Hendersonville, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Wandham. My fellow delegates, as we know, there's a pandemic, not only viral, but a mental health crisis as well. These are desperate times, and there has been an increased blame on mental illness for shootings nationally. This has been the same dialogue for years in terms of gun control circles, but as many negative aspects of mental health are unaddressed, and these are few and far between, animals often bear the brunt of their abusers' abuse and violent tendencies. In the past year, animal abuse has increased. It is necessary to take all precautions to protect these beings that are helpless as they are nonverbal. Guns do not inherently allow for their owners to take a life, but by providing those with violent tendencies a readily available target, we may be encouraging those people who are predisposed to take the next step. Protect animals. I yield my time.
Haley Wandham, St. Cecilia, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do, so yield, you have 7 seconds.
Asking from a neutral stance, could you clarify how somebody could just not go to a different shelter that doesn't require these checks?
I think overall, many shelters want the best
I'm
for their.
so sorry, delegates, but time for this pro round has elapsed. We'll now move into our final con round. Do I have my final con speaker? Holderby.
Holderby, Green Hill, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Bonk. So currently the TBI registry for animal abuse only keeps offenders on there for 2 years after their conviction. So is your bill aiming to change that number to 5 years?
It is not. They have the option to pay a fee to increase that, but I doubt many will.
Well, if it's 4 or 5 years after conviction, but the registry doesn't keep it for past 2 years, then how does that work?
The registry keeps it in a separate file that's not as open to the public.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then on the registry, it says that they can't guarantee the accuracy of the convictions. So does your bill do anything to make them verify the animal abuse convictions?
It does not. That will be up to the local.
Okay, thank you. I yield the remainder of my time.
Font to the Christian Academy. In section 4, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield, but you have 2 seconds.
No.
Okay, and with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of their time to the chair. We will now move into 1 minute and 42 seconds of the patron summation. Patrons, please begin when ready.
So I would like to address a few things said. First of all, children are not put on the registries. I know that was a concern as it's 18 and up only. Service animals are also not usually acquired through adoption agencies. You usually have to go through a training program. So I doubt that would be applicable. And for the percent that would be euthanized due to a rejected application, in my opinion, I believe that is far preferable to a slow and painful death. And there will be an overall decrease in abusers if some shelters choose not to apply this optional.
This bill can only improve the quality of life for shelter animals by protectively documenting these convicted of animal abuse and making these records easily accessible to shelters. Animals are more likely to be protected and live longer, happier lives, allowing these shelters to use convicts made in the last 5 years to deny adoption with the potential of saving thousands of lives in Tennessee alone. Just today, I was able to access TBI Animal Abuse Registry and view recently convicted offenders. We strongly urge the passage of this bill and believe the steps necessary for the state of Tennessee are minimal and provide an impressive step forward for the animal rights movement.
And with that, the patrons have yielded the remainder of their time and urged passage. We will now attempt to pass this by clicking yes or no. Yes is in favor of, no is opposed, and go slower is any and all abstentions. So on the count of 3, please click your vote.
By the count of this clerk, this bill does pass 40-2. Congratulations, sponsors.
Congratulations. We will now move on to Blue House Bill 21-1-3, an act to eliminate cash bail for nonviolent crimes and implement new pretrial service programs in the state of Tennessee. Patrons, before I begin, I see a motion. Please rise and state your motion.
Nashi Signal Mountain motion to extend the times to 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Unfortunately, that motion is not in order, as we still do need to get through the remaining 3 pieces of legislation in the next hour.
Okay, patrons, you have 2 minutes for your introduction. Please begin when ready.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Fellow representatives, I bring to you an issue that has been tied to Tennessee's identity as a state: incarceration rates relating to the cash bail system. The foundations of our current cash bail system is that some individuals in society have the means and status to buy their freedom, while others cannot afford the luxury to walk free, so they must wait and sit in jail until their court date. Now, this court date can be months into the future upon one's arrest. Nationally, 2/3 of people who go to jail live below the poverty line, making it less likely that for them to be able to pay bail. Incarceration only drives this inequity further, causing those who do not possess the right amount of money to lose their jobs upon other negative effects that come with conviction. Tennessee's incarceration rates stand out internationally, with roughly 853 Tennesseans being incarcerated per 100,000 people. Compare this to the nation's number of 698 incarcerated citizens per 100,000 people. The majority of accused citizens in the US are sitting in jail because of low-level offenses, meaning that those individuals are not a threat to society. With this bill, the current system of punishing the accused for nonviolent crimes prior to their trial will be replaced with pretrial services. This act will require a shift from the resource-based monetary bail system to a risk-based system of pretrial release, determined by a public safety assessment, or a PSA, that judges would be encouraged to utilize. Under this new system of pretrial release, financial ability to pay monetary bail is no longer the sole reason a defendant is released or held in jail pre-trial. The current cash bail system has been flawed without consideration of trying to mend its criminalization of poverty, and this bill solves that. I urge passage and yield the remainder of my time to my summation.
And with that, the patron has yielded 18 seconds to their summation. We will now move into 2 minutes of technical questions. Are there any technical questions on the floor? We will go in this order, and if we have time for more, I will call you. Giovanelli, Clyde, Angelova, Holderby, McDaniel, Waits.
Giovanelli, Beach, are people, I guess, or will they still be able to choose to pay the cash bail if they do choose so?
That is always an option, but I don't see why they would, especially if they're below the poverty line, like I said.
Clyde Clarksville Academy, does this bill include drug convictions?
Yes, that's considered low-level offense.
Angelova, Beach High School, how much is the average bail for a nonviolent crime?
That's up to the judge's discretion. It could vary. Sometimes it's as low as 500, but it could also go up to 5K.
Holderby, Green Hill, who will perform the public safety assessments?
This would be under Tennessee's Department of Corrections.
Luke Waits of Pope John Paul II High School. Where will the income lost by bail be gained from?
This bill actually would generate $4,639,939 for the fiscal year of 2021 to 2022. And this number was calculated by GovCab, as this bill was endorsed by my governor.
McDaniel Baylor, how long would the PSA take?
It wouldn't take long.
Funk, Hamatsingani, and I'll see what we have time for after that.
Volunteer Christian Academy, how much money does the Department of Corrections currently spend per inmate?
Per inmate in Tennessee, in my bill, it says it's that 23,000 number, 23,468 per inmate per year.
Singani Ravenwood High School, how much money do you plan this bill will cost?
It wouldn't cost anything.
And with that, time for technical questions has elapsed. We will now move into con and pro intent speeches. Do I have a con intent speaker? Maybe one that has not spoken an intent speech yet. Seeing none, Waits, you are recognized.
Equate to Pope John Paul II High School. I do not believe this bill should be passed for the reason that it will lose a valuable source of income. I do believe that the bail system is unfair to low-income people because they cannot buy their freedom. At the same time, it is a valuable source of income for the Tennessee government because for almost no actual costs, you get you do get a lot of money, and as well as the actual people, even if they are incarcerated, they are still getting free rooms, food, housing, heating, etc. So it's not like they're not going unpaid at all. I yield the remainder of my time to the floor.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of their time to the chair. Before I entertain the pro intent speech, did I see a motion?
Motion for a point of information?
That motion isn't that. Please rise and state your point. My apologies.
So when you mentioned that the governor's cabinet and your specific conference had created a figure for how much revenue this would generate, is that revenue above the amount that would be lost through cash bail, or just like revenue period?
Okay, so cash bail is actually just served as insurance for the defendant to come to their court date. Money that would be gained by the government, I'm not exactly sure what fellow representative
Like
was
it's not filling it
mentioning,
down.
but
It's sorry, delegates.
no.
You can ask follow-up questions during like a point of information, but you can't just give a general definition and then we will keep moving. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so it's just like bail bondsman is what I'm assuming this is what it's about. That's not government, that's primarily independent and private.
Okay, seeing as that point of information has been taken care of, we will now move into our pro intent speech, which I see has already been filled. So, Tally from Hillwood, you are recognized.
Tally, Hillwood High School, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Article 1, Section 16 of Tennessee's Constitution of 2014 states, quote, that excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted, end quote. Bear that in mind, as I tell you that in 2018, pretrial detention for misdemeanors in Tennessee rose 612% compared to the mere 66% growth in incarceration for misdemeanor convictions. This is not only an egregious gap between the percentage of people being detained versus those being incarcerated, but also serves as a much-needed cry for immediate action and reform of our criminal justice system. For example, in December of 2020, 54% of Tennessee's total jail population were comprised of people simply waiting for their trial, risking their jobs, finances, rent or mortgage, relationships, and lives in the name of what was and what is supposed to be a non-excessive bail. Spending months behind bars waiting to see your day in court encourages thousands across the nation and in Tennessee to simply accept plea agreements for crimes they did not commit, resulting in a criminal record proving an obstacle for their future housing, employment, education, and day-to-day lives. The passage of this bill solves the criminalization of poverty and deprivation of humanity from people sitting and waiting for their trial because they cannot afford to buy themselves out. By evaluating defendants with a risk assessment based on that of New Jersey's very successful model, those who are low risk can live their lives presumed innocent until guilty, as it should be, awaiting their trial. I highly encourage the passage of this bill. Thank you, and I yield my time.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of their time to the chair and urged passage. We will now move into Compro Debate, beginning with a con round. Do I have my first con speaker? Giovanelli.
Giovanelli Beach, the patrons yield to a possible series of questions.
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to fellow delegate.
That is your right. Please specify delegate.
Smith. So I'm a little confused. So how is this going to work if they opt into working, I guess, for the bail? Because the whole purpose of bail is so that they return to their court date to get their money back. So if they worked, why would they go to court?
I'm confused on your question. If someone is being arrested, they are given a set bail that they either pay, or with this bill, they wouldn't have to pay. They would just have to go to their court date. And that's only for non-violent crimes.
But it removes the incentive of going to your court date, because the whole incentive is you get your money back.
So this pretrial system is actually based on New Jersey, and with their system, they saw that 44% after 2017 law passed with this, a large amount of people still went to their court date. And that was significant prior to the passage.
I'm so sorry, Delegate, but time for this con round has elapsed. We will now move into our first pro round. Do I have my first pro speaker? Hayes. Oh, Hayes, you're muted. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Cameron Hayes, McCollin School. May I address the floor? I'm so sorry.
You're good. That is your right.
And may I also yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate.
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Delegate, you. There comes a time where we have to start prioritizing humanity and life and livelihood over the economic availability of a program such as cash bail. Delegate Waits brought up the idea that the people get free housing and free, heating. But I want to bring up from the 1834 Constitutional Convention of our state, where Delegate McKinney said, and I quote, "Unenviable is the condition of the slave, unlovely as slavery is in all its aspects, bitter and the draught it is that the slave is doomed to drink." Then it says, "His condition is better than the condition of free men of color in the midst of a community of white men." You all, what he was saying to me at least, harkens back to that idea that these people who are in jail are better off in jail than they are living by themselves. Let's not allow that type of thing to go on. Let's fix the issue. Let's allow people to get out of jail, go back to work, and provide for their families so they can, when they get out of jail, if they get convicted, they can have something to fall back on. I yield the rest of my time.
You, Collierville, may I address the floor?
Unfortunately, Delegate, as time was being yielded back to me, time elapsed for the round. We will now move into our second con round. Is there a second con speaker on the floor? McDaniel.
McDaniel, Bailey, did the delegates still do a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
Mayo, their mayor.
Yes, do that, and then I will address the motion on the floor.
Mayo, their mayor, my time to fellow delegate.
That is your right. Please specify the delegate.
Dungan.
Okay. And before you begin speaking, please rise and take your motion. If there's still
which one of us? There's two.
There were two.
Yeah.
My apologies. Wiggs, since you're unmuted first, I will address you first.
Wiggs, serve your motion to add another round of pro-con debate.
That motion is in order. Do I have a second?
Second.
We will now attempt to pass this by clicking yes or no. All those in favor, click yes. All those opposed, click no. Seeing an overwhelming majority of yeses, we will extend Compro Debate by one round, adding one con and one pro to each. So, McDaniels, my apologies. Was there a second motion, or was that your motion?
Oh, sorry, I still had my hand raised on accident.
That was my previous motion, ma'am.
Okay. So McDaniel, my apologies yet again, but take it away.
I asked earlier about how long these pre-trial services would take. Do you have an estimation of an exact time?
It wouldn't take long, as in it's just a basic background check that's more going into depth, that the judge has a physical copy that would help them.
And you know the average waiting time in between imprisonment and the court date?
That really depends on the crime and just the day, I guess, because it could be from a week to even months.
And how much money would be accrued in Tennessee? How much money is accrued in Tennessee from the cash bail?
How much would this bill generate?
No, how much does the cash bail provide already?
I don't have the exact statistic right now because they don't really put that out.
Thank you. I yield my time.
Duncan, Signal Mountain, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
Unfortunately, Delegate, I'm so sorry, but as time was being yielded, time for the round elapsed. We'll now move into our next pro round. Do I have my next pro speaker on the floor? You.
You, Collierville, sorry. May I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Sam. Delegates, cash bail is a sad, racist, and broken example of our failed criminal justice system and a downright product of capitalism and classism in America. This issue benefits the wealthy, leaving the impoverished working class to find themselves in a difficulty to pay such a hefty fine, then leaving detainees to wait for their court trial, which may range from a time of years or even months or even years. In addition, cash bail does not serve anything besides profiting incarceration. And by allowing cash bail to continue, we are allowing a system that criminalizes poverty, targets people of color, powers the wealthy, and leaves inequality and equity an issue that remains heavy in the state of Tennessee. And with that, I yield my time.
Sam Carville High School, may I address the floor?
That is your right. You have 15 seconds.
Okay. Abolishing cash bail gives the courts the ability to look at a number of factors for pretrial decisions without focusing on the ability to pay. Almost 500,000 people, which is 3/4 of the total number of people in jails, have not been committed of a crime. Of these 90%, the poorest Americans with the fewest resources.
I'm so sorry, Delegate, but time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into our next con round. Is there another con speaker on the floor? Wait.
Liquid to program ball the second high school. May I ask the delegates a series of questions and may I address the floor?
They do so yield, and that is your right.
So you said this bill will generate about $43,000. I just wanted to know how you got that estimate, how it would generate money if you're letting people go free.
It's 4 million, over 4 million. And
sorry.
This was calculated by GovCAD. I wasn't exactly in the room for that calculation, but I did give them the number of 23,468 per inmate, and that's how much the state is paying per inmate that we're holding in our prisons pre-trial, however you want to do that math per year. And it's around $80 per person per year.
Thank you, ma'am. And to go off what a previous delegate said, I do not believe the cash bail system is, as what they inherently said, racist. I believe that it could be classist, but I believe everyone has an equal opportunity to pay off this bail. So I just wanted to clear that up with my fellow delegates. I believe that was a misinformation. I yield the remainder of my time to the floor.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of their time to the chair. We'll now move into our, please rise and state your motion.
Sam Carville High School, point of information.
Rise and state your point.
Wait, do I have to repeat my name?
No, just go ahead
Okay.
and say your point.
Are we allowed to do like 2 actions in one sitting?
Yes.
Like, okay.
So basically, typically you either, address the floor or ask a question and then yield time to a delegate, but you are perfectly within your right if you want to address the floor and ask questions. It just means that nobody can speak after you since 2 actions have already been taken.
Okay, great, thank you.
No problem. So we will now move on to, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, a pro round. Thank you. I will select WIGs.
WIGs, Fairview High School, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Gardner. So in cash bail, approximately how many people would this remove from the prison system while they're awaiting their trial?
So in Tennessee, well, nationally, like I said, 2/3 of people are sitting in jail pre-trial for low-level offenses, nonviolent crimes.
All right. And would you say that this would not only save money from the prisons having to pay for people who honestly shouldn't be there?
Yes, it's just wasting money that we're holding people just for them to come back for a court date.
Will this ultimately come back to taxpayers having to pay less?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time.
Gardner at Central Magnet, may I address the floor?
That is your right. You have 20 seconds.
Fellow delegates, cash bail is essentially extortion. What it does is that allows rich people to pay off the police to live comfortably before their trials, while the poor are left to languish in jail for however long until a judge decides to see their case. And while you're waiting, your life can be destroyed. You can miss car payments, you can miss bills, you can lose your job. So I believe that if you're not at risk of flight and if you're not a danger to society, you should be allowed to live freely before your trial. And to address a point another delegate.
I'm so sorry, delegate, but time for this pro round has elapsed. We'll now move into our final con round. Do I have my final con speaker? Wolf.
Sorry, my hand should have been down. It wasn't working for some reason.
You're good. Clyde.
Clyde, Clarksville Academy, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so. Yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
McDaniel. I was just wondering if your bill applies to people with who had like previous convictions.
So if they do have any previous convictions, that would be a part of the PSA that the judge will see.
Okay, thank you.
McDaniel Baylor, may I address the floor?
That is your right. You have 40 seconds.
Great. Okay, so fellow delegates, this is not discrimination of any kind. I don't know where we're getting that from. This is just helping the state make sure that people don't blow off their court dates. And these people have also broken the law. So I don't see why this is a problem if we keep it. If we keep it, I mean, it's the same thing, you know? So I yield the remainder of my time.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of their time to the chair. We will now move into 1 minute and 10 seconds of the patron summation. Patrons, please begin when ready.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. To reiterate, Tennessee's current cash bail system is flawed, makes little sense, and is punishing low-income offenders who do not pose violent threats to society. To cover some con points, bail is served as an insurance so defendants go back to their court date. I ask you, how can one put a price on the ideals of justice and the very reputation of our defendant? Again, this bill would generate over $4 million. That alone already outweighs the profit that was mentioned. And just to go over some statistics, in 100,000 people of incarcerated Tennesseans, 1,962 of them are Black, while 503 are white. And just to go over the previous point on there's nothing being done, these people are violent and have committed crimes. There's insurance on that right now. These people who pay bail, who go free, are still under watch, and these defendants must either keep their job, obey curfew, and all these other conditions that they must follow, or they would be punished even if they walk free. This bill only would generate positive impacts to Tennessee government, and I urge passage.
And with that, the patron has urged passage and yielded the remainder of their time to the chair. We will now move into voting procedure. All those in favor click yes. All those opposed click no. Any and all abstentions click go slower. Please vote now.
By the count of this clerk, this bill does pass 39-5. Congratulations, sponsors.
Congratulations, and I will turn it over to my next chair.
And before we do that really quick, Hadia will also be jumping off before the end of it. So I just wanted to give a quick thank you to our chair, Hadia, for being here and giving up a little bit of your Saturday to chair some more debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we will move on to our next bill. Will the patrons of Red Senate Bill 21-3-1 enact to automatically restore voter rights to felons after completion of an incarceration period please come forward? Delegates, you have 2 minutes for your introduction, and you may begin whenever you're ready.
Tennessee has the second strictest felony voting laws in the country. 8.25% of Tennessee's voting age population has been disenfranchised due to a felony conviction. That's over 420,000. Yet only 20,000 of those are currently incarcerated. What about the rest? Every member of our society deserves a voice in democracy, and many of these felony voting laws target minorities. These laws are rooted in Jim Crow. For example, in 1901, the Alabama Convention said that their goal within statement of felony disenfranchisement was to establish white supremacy and to suppress Black votes. In 2016, almost 7.5% of Black Americans were nationally disenfranchised and unable to vote in the national election. But in Tennessee, 20% of Black adults and 10% of Latino adults were unable to vote due to a felony conviction. We must work together to ensure that those released from incarceration are capable of becoming involved in our society. By adding a huge percent of individuals to the voting pool, we can work to diversify the vote and ensure that every voice is heard in our democratic process. My bill, an act to automatically restore voter rights to felons upon completion of incarceration period, aims to tackle both systemic racism and Tennessee's voter turnout. I highly encourage all to pass this bill as it tackles some of Tennessee's deep-rooted problems and puts us on a path for a brighter future. I yield my time.
With that, Patron has yielded 42 seconds to summation. We will now move on to technical questions. We have 2 minutes. Do I have any technical questions? Adarsh, McDaniel, Akita Sanchez, Barton, Krish, Ginther.
Adarsh Ravenwood, what is the racial makeup of the disenfranchised population in Tennessee?
20%. I don't have that exact statistic, but I believe it's around 40% of those disenfranchised in Tennessee are Black, and I believe around 5% are Latino.
Thank you.
McDaniel, Baylor. Would felons be, actually, I'm sorry, could you specify which crimes void voter eligibility?
Under my bill, none would, but I believe currently it's murder and property theft related crimes.
Akita Sanchez Summit, what percentage of Tennessee's voting age population cannot vote due to these laws?
It is 8.25%.
Barton Webb, you mentioned in your introduction to statistics relating to Black Tennesseans and then Latino Tennesseans not being able to vote. Do you have a percentage for white Tennesseans?
I do not have that exact statistic, but I would assume that it's whatever is remaining left. So about 20,000 to 200,000, my bad.
Himatsingani, Ravenwood High School. So can you give me a statistic on how many people of color are currently incarcerated but do not have voting rights, have completed their incarcerated period but don't have voting rights?
In Tennessee, it's 21.5% of Black Americans in Tennessee.
Nashi?
Nashi, Signal Mountain. So like how many of those, what percentage of people who can't vote due to being incarcerated are for marijuana, like using marijuana usage?
I do not have a statistic.
Okay.
I'm sorry, delegates, time for this round has elapsed. We'll now move on to a con intent speech. And there is a con intent speech. McDaniel, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
McDaniel, Baylor, may I address the floor?
That is your right. You have 2 minutes.
Well, I applaud what this bill is trying to accomplish. We must remember that these felons are criminals and have been incarcerated for a reason. I don't see this as an issue of racism, but I do see this as sparing $400,000 for criminals who wish to gain something that they lost by not following the law is not a prudent move for the state. I do not wish to have people who have broken the law to have the ability to select our future leaders. The right to vote is a privilege and they have lost it by not doing the right thing. With that being said, should the Board of Probation and Parole clear them, I have no problem with that. But the problem I do have is that automatically restoring voter rights is a bad idea. These people don't deserve to just get out of prison and vote. It needs to be a gradual process where they understand that they're being given a second chance. Thus, they're more likely to follow the law so as not to lose that second chance. This bill opens up the possibility of having repeat offenders never really losing their right to vote because their rights are automatically restored when they get out. Furthermore, 98% of the Department of Corrections budget is used up every year, leaving a few million in reserve funding. Taking away $400,000 from that reserve funding hurts the Department of Corrections and their ability to maintain facilities. Just because you're an American doesn't mean you can do anything and still be able to vote. Voting is a right that only law-abiding citizens and those who have been cleared by the board and have taken gradual steps to see the error in their ways should have. Therefore, I discourage automatically restoring voter rights and urge failure of this bill. I yield the remainder of my time.
With time having been yielded, we will now move on to our pro intent speaker. Body, you are recognized.
Alibati, Macaulay School. Delegates, how come in this state?
We're out of order.
Oh,
Just ask what you're going to do.
it's an intense speech. Well, point of inquiry was if it's an intense speech, isn't it automatically addressing the floor?
So, just like future reference for everyone, before an intense speech, you have to ask, may I address the floor?
Oh, okay, my bad. Alibati, may I address the floor?
That is your right, delegate.
Delegates, how come in this state, if you commit a felony, your right to freedom of religion is not impeded? Your right to freedom of speech is not impeded, but your right to vote is impeded. Why is this even a thing in the first place? If we believe that felons do not have the judgment or ability to make good decisions for society, why are we even allowing them out of prison at all? In a time of voter suppression in a country that has a history for disenfranchising minority communities, laws that restrict voting rights are not surprising, which makes this bill so much more important in order to promote a fair democratic system that represents all people. Throughout America, 2.2 million African Americans are barred from voting as they are or once were convicted felons. In other words, that is 1 in 13 African Americans that are unable to vote in this country, which is a huge number. Sure, you can just say they commit more crimes and it's just a coincidence, but we must recognize the systemic problem that has plagued these communities in the form of racist policing, an inconsistent justice system, and redlining that has led to poverty, which in turn leads to more crime, and forms of voter suppressions in the past, such as poll taxes. Policies that prevent felons from reintegrating into society are not only incoherent, but they also have racial implications that are inherently tied to it. This bill is a bill that will help represent more people, stop the suppression of the vote, and make a good change in society. How can we, in good faith, stop a man or woman from voting for the rest of their life simply because they had more than half an ounce of marijuana in their possession? Is that really proportional to the crime, as stated in the United States Constitution that prohibits excessive sanctions for a crime? Tennessee must take a step forward, and this is a step in the right direction, and I highly urge the passage of this bill.
With that, we'll now move on to Compro Debate, starting with a con speaker. Do I have a con speaker? Barton.
Barton, Webb, to the patrons yield to a possible series of questions, and may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
Please do so, yield, and that is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Funk. So can you clarify a little bit what section 3 of your bill would say? Because in your bill, it obviously says that you would automatically restore the voter rights of felons. But in section 3, it says that felons would have to apply for voter eligibility. So can you specify that?
Section 3 is talking about the current Tennessee law, which like section 2 is talking about what my bill would do, and section 3 is talking about what the current Tennessee law is.
So with your bill, section 3 of the current Tennessee law would just not happen, correct? I yield my time then.
Following to the Christian Academy, does the patron yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so, yield, delegate. You have 22 seconds.
Okay. Many felons are repeat convictions, so will their voting rights be restored each time they are incarcerated and released?
Yes, because the point of prison is the goal of rehabilitation. So the hope is that once they've completed their incarceration, they have been deemed like rehabilitated. So that's why they would get their voter rights reinstated.
I'm sorry, delegate. The time for this round has elapsed. We will now move on to our first pro round of pro speaker. McNulty.
McNulty, West, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so, yield.
So do you agree that it is appalling that 33% of Black males in America have been convicted of crime when only about 12.5% of Americans are Black?
Yes.
Therefore, do you believe that this would decrease other racial disparities?
Yes.
Additionally, I yield the remainder of my time to chair.
With that, we'll now move on to our second con round of a con speaker.
Motion.
Please rise and state your motion.
Laputi, Webb, motion to extend pro-con debate by 1 round.
That motion is in order. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
We'll now vote on this through virtual acclamation. I'm going to count down from 3. All in favor, vote in favor. All against, vote no. 3, 2, 1, go. In the eyes of the chair, the yeas do have it. Pro-con debate will be extended by 1 round. Who did I call on someone for the con round yet? I don't think so. Okay. Akita Sanchez.
Akita Sanchez Summit, may I address the floor and may I yield the remaining time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify delegate.
McDaniel. Fellow delegates, I believe there is a fundamental misunderstanding in this bill. Felonies are the highest level of crimes you can possibly commit, including murder, rape, and robbery. What the delegate is saying is that drug-related charges were used in disenfranchisement, specifically in the Alabama quote. Drug charges are misdemeanors. If you're getting a drug felony, that means you're a cartel leader or someone who murdered someone for drugs. This bill is not fixing racial discrimination as found by the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in 2011. They found there is not actually discrimination present in felonies, as felonies are usually very fair because it's quite hard to fake a murder. Instead, the idea of racial discrimination is found in misdemeanors. Felonies are, again, murders, rapes, and robberies. We are giving voting rights to murderers, rapists, and robbers. This is what no civilized nation should do. We don't trust children with their judgment, which is why they don't get to vote. Why would we trust murderers and rapists?
This round has elapsed. We'll now move on to our second pro round. I have a pro speaker. Wolf.
Wolf Dubin, Hume Bog, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify delegate.
Austin. Fellow delegates, I urge the passage of this bill. There is absolutely no reason why we should be, if somebody has served their time, has served their rightful punishment for a crime they have committed, that we should be pushing them further out of our society. If somebody has served their time, if somebody has fulfilled their punishment, if somebody has completed and understood and finished the justice that was exacted upon them by our fair state, then that person should be invited back into our state. They should be invited back into their workplace if they apply and get accepted. And they should be invited back into our voting booths. Every American has the right to vote until they prove themselves incapable of having that. However, if you have proved yourself incapable of having that, such as a person who has been in jail, and then reproved yourself that you are now capable of having it, you should get it back.
I'm sorry, delegate. The time for this round has elapsed. We'll now move on to our third con round of a con speaker. McDaniel.
McDaniel Baylor, may I address the forum?
That is your right.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify delegate.
Giovanelli. So fellow delegates, as the previous delegate said in the other con round, we would be giving repeat offenders, people who have shown themselves to not be capable of keeping themselves clean and these voting rights, we would be giving them these voting rights, repeat offenders, people who've been doing this over and over again. And also, we're giving these to murderers and drug kingpins and all those kinds of people who, even though they've served their time, they're still terrible people. And I think this is really, really not a good idea. I yield the remainder of my time.
Giovanelli Beach, may I address the floor?
That is your right, delegate. You have 20 seconds.
Okay, so I said previously, felonies is not as racist as misdemeanors. Misdemeanors is where most of the racism lie. Most felons are white because most people that commit murders, rapes, and serious crimes like that are white males. Also, I want to point out the whole purpose of this punishment that the founding fathers of our country established
has elapsed. We'll now move on to our third and final pro round. I have a pro speaker. You.
Hugh Collarville, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate,
That is also your right. Please specify delegate.
Austin. Fellow delegates, we as participants in this conference all understand the value of voting. Voting is a right that every citizen is given through the law. Once felons serve their time, they too deserve the right to do their most dutiful thing as a citizen, which is voting. The state of Tennessee must realize that addressing this issue is the beginning of addressing the vital conversation of voter disenfranchisement in America. Delegates, if felons are allowed to participate in society after their sentence, they must also be allowed to vote. And in the big year of 2021, this conversation is even more crucial than ever. By accepting this issue, we are accepting the era of Jim Crow laws in this country. And this is a reality that we should never be comfortable with. And with that, I yield my time.
With that, I'm sorry, delegate. Proceed.
Jordan Austin, Red Bank High School. Do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so, yield.
So you mentioned earlier about the roots of Jim Crow being found in felony disenfranchisement. Can you just elaborate on that more?
When most of these felony voting laws were instated, it was around the time of the 15th Amendment, which gave Blacks the right to vote. And most of these laws were instated around that time in the aim to continue to still suppress that vote.
I'm sorry, delegates. The time for this round has elapsed. We'll now move on to our final con round of a con speaker. Brown.
Brown, Hendersonville, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Angelova, my fellow delegates. Did I say address the floor? Sorry. Okay, sorry. My fellow delegates, personally, I do agree with what this bill aims to do. I agree that there are so many racist barriers that disenfranchise and prioritize that disenfranchisement of poverty-stricken people of color specifically. However, I don't think a pedophile should be allowed to vote. I don't think a pedophile should have the same voice in our country's future as a non-violent criminal. I yield my time.
Angelova, Beach High School. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
We do so. Yield, delegate. You have 16 seconds.
Are you aware that a study found that 37% of offenders were rearrested for a new crime and sent to prison again within the first 3 years of crime or of being out?
My bill does not focus on actual being incarcerated. It focuses on restoring rights upon release. It does not focus on.
I'm sorry, delegates. The time has elapsed. We'll now move on to 1 minute and 42 seconds of patron summation. Patron, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Felony disenfranchisement law.
I'm sorry, there was a motion that I missed. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Himmat Singhani, Ravenwood High School. Motion for point of information.
Please state your point of information.
So is it correct that often involving murders, especially for people of color that have been racially accused of this, would self-defense be included in murder?
I do not know because it's not focusing on trials. It's just focusing on restoration of rights.
I have an answer to the point of information. May I speak?
Tyler, is that allowed?
So typically we redirect it to the patron if they can answer. I believe the patron has given an answer. So we can, it's also my understanding that the question is based on things that are decided at the trial phase, but I may be wrong about that.
Yeah, I think we're just going to move on to patron summation. Patron, you have 1 minute and 42 seconds.
Okay, so I would first like to emphasize that this may seem very out of the box and it's something that's just so crazy to do, but I would just like to point out that Tennessee is only among seven states that don't restore rights, and I think that's kind of insane, and I just don't really see the point of it. And most of these states that do still have these laws in state are in the South, which we all know does have those Jim Crow roots. but I'm gonna go back to my actual summation, which is felony disenfranchisement laws are inherently discriminatory. Their deep roots in Jim Crow have been made apparent. By passing this law, we can work to fight systemic racism at its core and diversify the vote of Tennessee. When we alienate ex-felons by restricting their rights, we push them down and disconnect them from society. We must also work together to put ex-felons back into society as productive citizens. By giving them a right to vote, we allow them to have a voice in their world and to make an impact. States that have passed similar laws have seen lower recidivism rates over time upon passage. I highly encourage passage of this bill as it fights systemic racism, voter turnout, ex-felon alienation, and recidivism rates all in one fell swoop. I yield my time.
With that, time has been yielded to the chair, and we will now move on to voting procedure. Tyler, I have to go take care of something real quick. It'll just be a minute if you could do voting, and then I'll be right back to chair the next bill.
Yes. So we're going to vote the same way that we have. You'll use yes to indicate that you are voting in the affirmative, no to indicate that you are voting against the passage of the bill, and go slower if you would like to abstain. I will count down from 3, and then you can go ahead and put your votes in. 3, 2, 1, vote. By the count of this clerk, the bill does pass 28-15. Congratulations, sponsor. I'll go ahead and call the next sponsor for Red House Bill 21-1-5 up to the floor. That's Alexandra Toulianis and Gracie Gerhardt, an act to give all substance abusing pregnant women eligibility for TennCare. Patron, you have 2 minutes for your introduction. You may begin when ready.
Tennessee is in a major crisis. The problem of drug addiction is ravaging our great state and is disproportionately affecting our low-income community. 14% of citizens are considered under the poverty line, exposing them to the main risk factors of addiction, including genetic predisposition, drug availability, lack of supervision, untreated mental illness, and poverty itself. Women in these low-income communities lack the resources to battle addiction after becoming pregnant, even if they wish to protect themselves and their unborn child. Under the current statutes of TennCare, the Tennessee State Medicaid, these women and their unborn children are not guaranteed medical rehabilitation and protection when they're in one of the most vulnerable situations that one can experience.
Babies born to substance abusing women who do not receive health care and proper treatment will go through withdrawal when they are born. If they survive birth and the withdrawals, they are at risk for sudden infant death and birth defects that could affect them for the rest of their lives. If the child is to make it to adulthood, they are extremely likely to become addicted to drugs as well. Our bill can address this problem. If we address drug abuse in pregnant women, not only will we be helping the victims of poverty and addiction, but we will be preventing future addiction in their children. I encourage all of you, fellow delegates, to use your compassion for human life as well as your logic in order to ensure that all addicted pregnant women and their babies are afforded medical assistance and rehabilitation in a time of desperate need. Thank you. I urge passage and yield my time to summation.
With that, patrons have yielded 41 seconds to summation, and we will move on to technical questions. Do I have any technical questions? Adarish, McDaniel, Giovanelli, Marian, Orellana, Mitsingani, Funk, Nashi, Ginther.
What is the percentage? Atarish, what is the percentage of pregnant women who are substance abusers having children that grow up to be drug abusers? What's the percentage of that?
So 5% of pregnant women abuse substances. So that's about 4,000 children every year that are at risk for future drug addiction and also the health problems that come with that.
Thank you.
McDaniel, Baylor, would this bill have any economic effect on the state?
It shouldn't, because the budget is already allows for everything that we're asking.
Giovanelli Beach, will the infant of the woman who is abusing substances still be taken away from their mother?
No, but that would be kind of under the jurisdiction of social workers, but hopefully the mother would be rehabilitated under this bill.
Mary Tippin Christian Academy, does this bill also apply to pregnant women who might be imprisoned or in jail for substance abuse?
It can apply to all pregnant women who are substance abusing who want to seek rehabilitation, but I guess with jail, there could be a couple more hoops to jump through.
Hey, Soriana Springfield High School. Will this plan also include women who are undocumented residents of the state of Tennessee?
It does not, I don't believe, because of like the set requirements to apply for TennCare. And while this does bypass a lot of requirements, I don't think that that's within our jurisdiction to change that.
Himmet Singhani, Ravenwood High School. Has there been any states or countries that have applied this?
So not this entire bill specifically, because we are combining healthcare with rehabilitation, but states have done this with either just healthcare or just rehabilitation.
After this round has elapsed, we'll now move on to our con intent speech. Do I have a con intent speech? McNulty,
McNulty West, may I address the floor?
that is your right. Delegate, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I agree that substance abuse is an issue in our state specifically, and in the nation. I believe that this bill does not necessarily handle it in the best way. Partially, I find issue with the fact that it includes many substances but does not include alcohol. Alcohol abuse is common, and especially in Appalachia, so I believe that that should be addressed. I also believe that there should be an income bar. I do not believe that you should have to be below the poverty line in order to become eligible for this program, but because it has no fiscal discrimination, it could easily become too expansive for the state to handle when they could more easily spend money on individual families. If less people are part of this program, those who are served will be served better, and some people may not need this as much as others because they have the financial resources to pay for their own rehabilitation. I also believe that this is a very highly unlikely case, but because according to the bill, the diagnosis criteria is simply a drug test, some women may do a small amount of a drug to qualify for this program shortly before an appointment, which may go awry or cause an addiction. I don't see this to be heavily likely, but I find that the diagnosis, the criteria for this should be meetings with a therapist and evidence for prolonged abuse of the drug, not to restrict people from getting it, but to make it more accurate and to make sure that the right people are being helped. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
With that, time has been yielded to the chair, and we will now move on to a pro intent speech. Do I have a pro intent speaker? Valerio,
Sophia Balidu Baylor School, may I address the floor?
that is your right. Delegate, you have 2 minutes.
All right. It has been proven time and again that criminalizing the victims of drug addiction does not work. What works is rehabbing them and helping them get back on the right track. This bill is a fantastic way to start the process of helping those in our state who cannot help themselves. We need to help as many people as possible, especially when it comes to things as important of the very lives of pregnant women in our state. As the patrons have already mentioned, this issue specifically affects people of color and low-income women, and we must finally take an overdue step to help and protect these women and their children. While this may not be enough, it is certainly a step in the right direction, and we can always add on to it later. We just have to take this first step. Any cost for this is rendered completely null when it comes to something as important as the very lives of our citizens. Find it in yourself to help those who need it most. Look inside yourself for all of your compassion. I yield my time to the chair.
With that, time has been yielded to the chair, and we'll now move on to our first con round. Do I have a con speaker? Nashi.
Nashi Signal Mountain, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so. Yield.
May I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify delegate.
Duncan. So I just have a few questions. So first, what percentage of women who take drugs will have the child end up also taking drugs?
So the thing about that is you can't really put a statistic, but people who are born into substance abusing families are about 70% more likely to abuse substances whenever they grow up, because genetic predisposition is one of the largest factors in addiction.
Additionally, I think that a really important part of our bill is that it's of course addressing the fact that children who are born to substance abusing mothers are gonna be more likely to become addicted to drugs, but also this is really about their health when they're born, because when they're born, if they are born alive, they're at great risk for death and illness because they are going through withdrawals. So that's like probably one of the most important parts of this bill, not just them getting addicted in the future.
With that, the time for this round has elapsed, and we'll now move on to our first pro round of a pro speaker. Tally.
Tally Hillwood High School, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
We do so yield.
And may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That's your right. Please specify delegate.
Sam. Okay, will this bill also apply to anyone that does not like identify as a woman but is pregnant? For example, you go through the process of having like male on your gender on your driver's license as your gender, but is still pregnant and is seeking eligibility for this?
Yes, this can apply to anyone who's pregnant with child.
Okay, are you then not worried about sort of making this on a statewide level, defining women as those who are trans or non-conforming?
I do see your concerns for sure, but as it is now, when people ask to qualify for TennCare because they are pregnant, TennCare recognizes them as women, and personally, like I think everyone can agree here that there definitely needs to be change with that. But right now we're just trying to find as many people to be eligible to seek help as possible.
Delegates, the time for this round has elapsed. I would like to remind everyone that if you're doing a con speech, it needs to be against the bill. And if you're doing a pro speech, it needs to be for the bill, or at least in favor. You can't do a sarcastic con, you can't do a sarcastic pro. We will now move on to our next con speech. Do I have a con speaker? Holderby.
Holderby, Green Hill, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify delegate.
Dungan. So can you please explain why you want to expand TennCare and do rehabilitation? Like what's the correlation there?
So TennCare provides rehabilitation, and the reason we want to expand it is because there's a lot of extenuating circumstances in which someone could be considered above the poverty line, but their circumstances could be, for example, that they've been cut off for their family for drug abuse or being pregnant at a young age. And for teenagers who are technically under their parents' healthcare policies, some until they're 26. So it kind of applies to a wider scope of people who really have a need for this policy. And the rehabilitation is provided under TennCare.
Oh, okay, thank you. I yield the remainder of my time.
Dungan, Signa Mountain, do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
We do so yield. Delegate, you have 19 seconds.
Are you at all concerned that the passage of this bill might cause an increase in substance abuse, as it would provide a way for impoverished women to get health care for their children?
So I think if you maybe would take just a brief moment to read a little bit more into our bill, basically, to remain eligible for this program, you have to get the drug test. But as someone noted in our con intent speech, which I think that they maybe again need to read a little bit more into our bill, to remain eligible, you have to attend a rehab program. I believe it's once a month. And so to continue doing that, you would need to actually have a substance problem.
Has elapsed. We'll now move on to our final pro speaker. Do I have a pro speaker? Chintalapudi.
Chintalapudi, Webb, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
Fellow delegates, I urge passage of this bill for the safety and welfare of not only these pregnant women, but their children as well. 8.4 million pregnant females ages 18 and older have misused prescription drugs in the past year. In fact, the number of women with opioid use disorder at labor and delivery has quadrupled since 1999. And research shows that this has really adverse impacts on infants and children. And I know that a lot of people have concerns with people faking these substance abuse, but as Tuliotis has pointed out, you have to attend a meeting once a month. So they're gonna see that they have drugs in their system. So it's not like they can just fake it Like you can't really do that. And also doctors know signs of prolonged abuse, like itchy skin, like there's like external signs of substance abuse. So taking a little bit of a drug like right before is not enough to show those external signs of prolonged substance abuse that all medical professionals are trained in being able to identify.
The time round has elapsed. We'll now move on to our final con round of the con speaker. Hamatsingani.
Hamatsingani, Ravenwood High School. Did the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so, yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That's your right. Please specify delegate.
McNulty. So basically, in what previous delegates have been saying about their concerns with people faking substance abuse or people like, you know, having an increase of substance abuse for women, how you said you wanted like people to like look more into your bill. Can you please elaborate on that? Like look more into your bill?
I mean in the actual text of the bill, because some of the things people have been saying are factually incorrect when actually referencing our bill. Such as, yeah, just especially that section that's talking about the first time drug test, just to get you qualified to then go to like rehab sessions, but to remain qualified, again, you have to go to the rehab sessions, which you would not go to if you did not actually have a problem.
Yeah, additionally, I do understand the concerns, but if you think about it from a logical standpoint, rehabilitation is a mentally grueling and time-consuming process that obviously you don't need if you don't have substance abuse issues. So people who have done a drug once would not be seeking out these type of healthcare extensive measures. So I just find that highly unlikely to happen.
With that, this round has elapsed. We'll now move on to 1 minute and 41 seconds of patron summation. Patrons, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Again, I just want to reemphasize that I think starting from the beginning of that pro-con, just some non-factual information was presented. That our bill definitely clarifies that, like the actual text, I mean. So they will be deemed drug abusers once they do a test and remain eligible with rehab. And we don't include marijuana or alcohol because that is so widely abused, and that would send the budget like that would not be accounted for, as well as it's difficult to test for alcohol, and many people use marijuana.
People from low-income socioeconomic backgrounds are far more subject to the main risk factors of addiction than the majority of the population, as well as women considered to be above the poverty line who are not legally considered poor. Pregnant women from these communities deserve the right to help and protect themselves and the future health of their babies. To ignore this vulnerable population would be criminal, and our bill can help the current population's drug problem, as well as that of future generations. It is imperative that this bill is passed, so we move passage and yield our time to the chair.
With that, time has been yielded to the chair. We'll now move on to voting procedure. We'll do this same way as the past 5 bills. All in favor, we press the check mark. All against, press the X. All abstaining, press go slower. I'll count down to 1, 3, 2, 1.
According to the count of this clerk, this bill does pass 35-6. Congratulations, sponsors.
Congratulations, delegates.
With that, the formal business of this showcase session has come to an end. Want to give a couple of thank yous before we go. First, to our chairs, Mr. Yarborough, Ms. Kruger, and Ms. Ryan. These 3 individuals have done so much work for the conference over the last year, transitioning it into the virtual realm, sticking with it, helping make sure that people were prepared. So I just want to take every opportunity that we have to recognize their hard work and thank them for all that they have done to make today and this entire conference season possible. I want to thank our delegates. Everyone here was either the sponsor of an outstanding bill that was chosen to present at the showcase, or was identified by our award committee as an outstanding delegate at one of our high school conferences. You all are the people that make this conference special, and we're so grateful that you were willing to take a chance on a virtual conference, and that you have been willing to come back and spend another couple of hours talking about ways to make the state of Tennessee better. So thank you very much. Lastly, I'll say that I'm putting a link in the chat. Anyone here is definitely eligible to apply to volunteer at one of our middle school conferences. If that's something you're interested in doing, we have one coming up next week on May 7th. And if you're interested, you can apply at that link that I just put in the chat. We are still looking for, a handful of people to come help us out that day. So if that's something that interests you, it's a really fun opportunity to get back, and there's going to be a lot of good middle school debate. All right, Elise, Susan, if you guys have anything to add.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. It is a beautiful day outside, and I am just so impressed that you guys are so committed to debate and making the world a better place, that you're here with us on Zoom. I hope that if you are already signed up to volunteer, we will see you this coming Friday for middle school. And I see a lot of faces that I know are already signed up, and I'm excited about that. But yeah, we could use about 4 or 5 more people on that list. So we have 12 committees of middle schoolers in the morning. So we need all hands on deck. Thank you guys so much. It was great debate. And Susan, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, this was thrilling. As the person who was in the components for all the YIG conferences, I missed out on seeing a lot of debate. So I absolutely love this. And I concur with Elise and Tyler. Just thank you guys, because, when it's this gorgeous outside and you guys are here, it just shows just how wonderful you guys are. And we couldn't be more pleased with how our virtual conferences went. Saying that, we hope that we are back in person next year, and just can't wait to see you guys debate in person. But thank you all again. We hope you have a great rest of the year, and hope to see some of y'all at middle school.
Have a wonderful weekend. Get outside.